Another development in the now infamous stoush between President Trump and CNN reporter Jim Acosta, the news network, is taking the White House to court. CNN claims the president has violated Acosta's First and Fifth Amendment rights by revoking his press pass.
Yeah, it's certainly got us talking in the newsroom, and it is our jumping off point for tonight's Taking Stock. We're joined by Sarah Jane Tasker, senior business reporter at The Australian, and Jeff Elliott, managing partner and corporate financial communications expert from GRA Causeway. So thank you both for joining us.
Okay.
I mean, this kind of story about CNN versus Trump, it kind of keeps on going, talking about First and Fifth Amendment rights now being affected by the ban for Jim Acosta. And what do you think when you see all this, Sarah Jane?
Well, firstly, I think it's crazy. That's always my first impression. I think it's interesting from a journalistic point of view to see, like, the president of a democratic, nation banning, like, a reporter from doing their job. But I also think it plays into Trump's strategy and the way that he kind of talks to his supporter base by an us and them type mentality of the press versus him.
And is it a very sage decision to go and sue the Trump administration as a news network? Well,
look, I think I agree with Sarah in the sense that it's a constitutional right, I guess, that the press are looking at in terms of their reaction to Trump. Their First Amendment rights are something that the press in the US hold very dearly, and it sets up this battle between the president and the press. The press in the States are invested with, I guess, somewhat more authority than maybe we're used to here because of that constitutional right. So they take it quite seriously when these things are threatened. And also the other thing I think that is different, particularly from Australia, is that Trump is the head of state and president, but he never goes to the dispatch box in a Westminster-style system. So that press conference we saw the other day, the media are kind of performing somewhat like an opposition, if you like. And Acosta, I think we saw a snapshot in time in that press conference the other day. There's been a long lead-up to that event. There's been a lot of hostility between CNN and the White House. There was an article in The Atlantic a couple of months ago talking about Acosta as a performance journalist, which I don't necessarily agree with, but there's quite a bit of debate around what CNN are doing and the Trump v Media stoush. Well,
it's interesting because you actually were a Washington correspondent for quite a while for The Australian. So, I mean, this combative stance, particularly combative stance, you have to say, between Trump and the media, does it take you by surprise? Is it like anything you've ever seen before?
Who knew that I'd be here saying, well, the relationship between Bush and the press corps was actually pretty good. Like the rapport behind the scenes with Bush was relatively good, and I think the White House and Bush respected the right of the press to ask the hard questions. Trump does not do that, and I think, to Sarah's point, he's playing to his base as well. So he's playing to the Midwest and the politics in the US. It doesn't do him any harm. But certainly, I saw John Anderson, the former Deputy Prime Minister, on Q&A the other night, who talked about, I wish we could just get on and not shout at each other so much. And I think there's that febrile atmosphere in the US at the moment, which is reflected in other polity around the world, including here, that really is not doing us any favours.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah Jane, what do you think about where CNN goes from here, for example? I mean, like, how does it sort of change the way they're viewed in the public, the fact that they are having this now through the courts issue with President Trump?
Yes, interesting. I mean, I think they had to take the move they did, and I think it's a wise move to take. You can't just take it. You can't just say, OK, sure, we'll have our press pass revoked and not send one of our main reporters into the White House to cover what's happening. But it is interesting because it's also interesting when the media make themselves a story, and I think that always is a interesting tack to take, because also at the same time the audience and the viewers don't always want you to be the story. They want you to tell them what's happening. So I think I'm not sure if they're going to win back the support of those that already dislike them. But then again, that's Trump's base, so I don't think they care about them not liking them. But I think those of us in the press are probably glad that they're taking the move that they are and that they're sticking up for what they believe are their rights.
Trump has said of the media in the US, and again in the lead up to the event that happened last week, was that they're the enemy of the people. Now it's pretty aggressive rhetoric.
Absolutely.
And it's rhetoric, but it's kind of dangerous rhetoric, and we've seen obviously the threats laid on to both Democrats and the media with the instance recently of explosive devices being sent to media organisations and leading Democrats, including Clinton's office and Obama. So, you know, it's a fairly hostile atmosphere, and it'd be great if it just dialed down a bit.
Yes.
But I don't think it will, though, right? Like, it's just dialed up, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean...
If they successfully sue, it will not calm the atmosphere.
Exactly.
That's right.
Switching gears a bit and coming home to Australia, Sarah Jane, I might throw this one straight at you, because one of the things you do cover for The Australian is the gaming industry. And we saw a shopping centre in Queensland has been been told it's okay to put 45 gaming machines, slot machines, pokies machines, in this shopping centre. Now, this is kind of a family-friendly space. It's near restaurants, near a bus depot. Are you surprised with that result?
Yeah, I was very surprised. I had no idea that was happening, and when I saw that come through, I actually was shocked, because I think in the current environment where there's increasing kind of community angst about pokie machines and problem gambling and what it's doing to communities, that a government's willing to let 45 new ones into its city. And I think it's also interesting that the Queensland government are also potentially looking at a second casino licence on the Gold Coast. And as part of that licence, they have actually said they're not allowing any new pokey licences for that casino. So if somebody does get a second casino in the Gold Coast, they're going to have to buy pokey machines under licence from other pubs and clubs. So I'm quite confused of why the government have set that for a casino licence, but they're actually allowing a shopping centre to put 45 pokie machines in.
It's a real head-scratcher.
Well, the poker machines are going to be in a pub which has an entrance into the shopping centre, so I guess that's how they get around it, but it's still, the placement is awkward, isn't it?
Well, I think what's interesting from a slightly different tack is shopping centres needing to reinvent themselves in the light of online digital environment, right? So I think, you know, China, for instance, in China, I think new malls there, about 40 to 50% of the floor space is now dedicated to beverage and entertainment. Other malls that are being created in the US have high residential component and lots of open space, you know, 40 to 50% open space. So I think that is one answer that we're, and one thing that we're seeing with shopping centres generally and malls, is to change the nature of the format. And this is an example of it, and I think perhaps there's going to be more of it.
Yeah, but should it be pokie machines as the extra?
It's a different proposal.
Well, you know, they're licensed legal products, so I make no judgment, but you know, that is, I think we'll see more of it as we go forward.
Well, it is interesting that 20 years ago in 1998 there was a very similar proposal to do this, and it got knocked back, and now we're seeing that it's getting ahead, and it is difficult to look past the sort of the growth in that space and the power.
There's a lot of community opposition to this.
Absolutely, there is. But I did just look. Aristocrat Leisure, you know, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, developer and manufacturer of pokie machines in Australia. It's listed on the ASX. In the last 5 years, shares are up 464%. It's now a $17 billion company. I mean, do you think that there's a possibility that that sort of rise can help something like this go ahead?
I probably wouldn't agree with that. I think, and with Aristocrat, a lot of that growth has come from offshore for them, so it hasn't really been domestic growth that's driven the shareholder jump. And I would say that not necessarily. Like, I think that, you know, that shouldn't be something that the government or that regulators look at when looking to approve these pokey machines. I just don't think that that would come into contention. And I actually will be surprised if it does go ahead, because there's still another community meeting to go, and there has been strong opposition to it. I think there was over 80% of people were against it, so I'm surprised that they did agree to it. But then maybe there's a question of it being a revenue raiser for the government, who obviously are having some budget issues up there in Queensland.
Jeff, what do you
Well, it's a community debate that's good to have, so I suspect we haven't heard the end of it, that's for sure.
Definitely not. Another thing that we perhaps haven't heard the end of is this incredible, I don't know if you saw this one, an incredible Bunnings-related kind of issue, we could say. So Bunnings says...
Very technical, so pay attention.
It is. This is really full on, right? So they've suggested strongly that all of the sausage sizzles around the country put the onions first and then the sausage on top. They don't want onions flying around their, you know, beautiful shopping centres willy-nilly, because that's a slipping
or their car parks, which are
wherever it might be. You know, they don't want the onions coming out of the snag and roll. What do you think about this? Is this crazy?
Well, look, I'd be an OH&S nightmare, because I think there's a really good format and theme in having a Bunnings pop-up bar. But, you know, I don't think alcohol and power tools necessarily mix. But I'd go to it, right? I mean, you know, we're always at Bunnings. I mean, we spend the day there and then maybe go back later on for a beer. But look, I think it's crazy. I mean, you know, onions on top, onions underneath. I don't really mind either way, but you know, if that's what they need to do in order to satisfy the OH&S technocrats. But really, I'm surprised that it's come to this.
Well, there was a tweet that I saw where somebody went one step further and said, actually, you're messing around with the structural integrity of it, because you're going to make the bottom soggy and you're going to make it all fall through, and then you're going to have a huge disaster on your hands. I mean,
Can we get Neil Perry in to
Yeah.
give us advice?
Look, I wonder, did someone actually slip on an onion? And is that...
Well, that's right.
There's no actual statistics on onion slipping injuries, and I'd be surprised if a lawyer could make it stand up in court that it's because Bunnings didn't instruct them to put the onions on first that accident happened. So it is an odd one.
Are we becoming more litigious in Australia? I mean, are we more likely to be suing left and right?
Let's hope not.
What do you think? I mean, is that where this comes from?
I think it calls for legislation to have a sort of a no-slip zone legislation around charity sausage sizzles. I mean, honestly, I think we can all move on. It's a crazy situation.
It is crazy. I mean, I just don't understand.
It's a bit nanny state, right?
Yeah, and I mean, how are people going to adhere to it anyway? When those community groups are out there on those barbecues on a Saturday and Sunday morning, they're not thinking where the onions are going, they're just slapping it together and passing it on.
I'd say there's a whole lot more health and safety risks than just the onion.
Exactly.
Well, exactly.
But it's a legitimate topic because
the hand washing, the people serving food who aren't used to serving food. You know.
Legitimate topic. John Howard used to talk about barbecue stoppers, and this really literally is one. So,
there's people working with heat and fat and all these other things.
True.
And the onion is the culprit. I don't get it.
Yeah, exactly. Look, as long as they keep on coming, I mean, that's all I really care about. As you said before, I mean, the delivery system is, as long as you don't muck around too much with the actual Aussie taco, as we call it.
that's very good.
Look, I'm going to eat it either way.
Exactly.
Okay. Me too.
Right, well, that's all the time we have for Taking Stock. Jeff Elliott, thank you very much. Sarah Jane Tasker,
Thank you
very much.